Here's your bracket members: Dave Gilbert, Steve Painter, Rafael Flores, Walter Gleason, Nikita Lear, Cade Nelson, Logan Smith, Joey Wolf, Caden Gasser. This is the Bracket U with your host, Coach Tonsoni.
Welcome, everyone, to Bracket U, a college basketball bracket podcast brought to you by Delphi Bracketology. We're currently in our 9th year of bracketology and wish to bring you updates as often as possible so that you know where your favorite team stands in regards to the NCAA tournament. This podcast is for all you junkies who have March Madness all season long, and particularly here at the end of February. We're able to do this thanks to the sponsorship of Coca-Cola Bottling of Kokomo and generous donations of our followers. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for creating our intro music and to Jared Morris and the Assembly Call for inspiring us to reach out. I'm Brian Tonsoni, and joining me tonight, an all-star panel. We have Alan Bykiowski, Crack Sidewalks, a Marquette publication, has joined us before, and Kerry Miller of the Bleacher Report and the Mock Selection Committee that'll be out on Twitter. We're going to talk brackets and some tough decisions that have to be made by all of us who are in the bracketology world. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us this evening.
Sure thing. Good to be with you.
So, Kerry, if you will, introduce yourself and talk a little bit about how you got going in bracketology and this mock selection committee process that's going to be fun to watch this weekend.
Yeah. First things first, I apologize if my internet is a little shoddy. Verizon's supposed to be coming out, so if I glitch, forgive me in advance. But no, I've been doing bracketology for honestly more than half my life at this point. I mean, I love what you're doing with Delphi. If I could go back and find my physics notes from AP Physics, it's like, force equals mass times acceleration. Also, Syracuse is a 3 seed. I've been doing it since high school, and just got into it professionally, kind of by accident. But yeah, the mock committee, we did this last year. It was like, over the period of 4 days, I think I was talking to these guys for like 30 hours about brackets, just completely nerding out. And we're going to be doing it again. It's going to be a lot of fun. So it'll be on YouTube, starting Thursday night, going straight through, and we'll have our little selection show at 6 p.m. Eastern on Sunday, exactly 1 week before the brackets are revealed.
Very good. Looking forward to that. And Alan, you got to be feeling good about Marquette. The last time Graham and you and I talked, Graham and I were a little bit higher on Marquette than you were, and so it's turning out to be a good thing.
I think that I may have come around to where you guys are at. I'm definitely excited with the way the season has gone. Last week, between the comeback against Creighton, followed with the win over DePaul that may not have been quite as heavy as we would have liked, but at this point, a win is a win. It's just a matter of doing enough to keep where they're at. I have a hard time seeing them really moving up too much further just because of what the schedule looks like, but this is far better than even my optimistic expectations were in the preseason. I thought it was a single-digit seed and a team that could be top 4 in the Big East, and they are a heck of a lot more than that.
Well, we're going to spend some time this evening just talking about decisions that we are considering and can be a tough for us bracketologists, and we'll just go around the room and ask questions. I'll take the first shot at it, and let's talk about the last number 1 seed. I think that they're pretty set right now, but the last number 1 with Purdue is a little more in jeopardy after their recent play. Kerry, does UCLA, are they the team that's going to push Purdue, and where do you see that right now?
Yeah, I think Kansas is certainly solidly on the 1 line, but could we get a second Big 12 team? If Texas was to win the home game against Kansas, if Baylor was to win the Big 12 tournament, there's definitely an opening there. And then UCLA, of course, I have them at 5 overall right now, but I think Purdue is pretty solidly ahead of UCLA at the moment. But yeah, there's still, even with less than 2 weeks until Selection Sunday, plenty of time for that to change. But I think the top 3 are solidly Kansas, Houston, and Alabama in some order.
Alan, your thoughts on that last number 1 seed?
I think the real difficulty for UCLA is just that you don't have the quantity of quality at the top that you get with a Purdue. And I mean, we saw at the top 16 reveal, UCLA was 8th at that point, and they've moved up more because everybody ahead of them slipped up rather than necessarily their own merits. As much as sweeping the mountain road trip is a positive for them, it's not like they're getting wins over the tourney. It's not like they're adding Q1A wins or the kind of road wins that we really saw push some teams up. Kansas State and Iowa State come to mind that were a little higher than people might have expected. I guess if they add that Arizona win and Purdue slips up again, maybe UCLA could move up there. But right now, for me, there's still a little bit of a divide between the two that seems hard to bridge.
And Texas was close in the reveal. So, Kerry, you're talking about if it's not UCLA, it's a second Big 12 team between Texas and Baylor. I think that's ultimately where it plays out in these next 2 weeks. So, Alan, I'll throw it to you. Do you have a question that you would like for us to discuss on any line you want?
One of the teams that is really I'm curious to hear where you guys are at right now is Kentucky. I had them out of the field for a while, and yesterday I completely tore everything down, built it back up, and I got to the 16 spot, the last 4 seed, and Kentucky was in the mix of teams I was looking at there. And it seemed baffling that this team that I had out of the field and in Dayton for a long time is now suddenly, just that I'm even thinking of them there. They landed at the 20 spot, the last 5 seed for me. And I think right now somewhere in that 5 to maybe top of the 7 line is the most fair, but none of their metrics are worse than 22 as of this morning. They have the quality wins with the wins against Tennessee, whatever Tennessee may be doing right now. I'm curious where you guys are at on that team. And, if they happen to win their last 2, they've got Vanderbilt and a road trip to Arkansas. Do you guys think they might be able to get up to a 4 seed?
Kerry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's funny is everybody was, had them first 4 out or last 4 in. I still had them somewhat comfortably in. Now I'm low on Kentucky. I have them as my top 7. But yeah, I think it's incredible how far they've come. I'm in the same boat with Indiana. Mid-January, I had them in my first 4 out, and now they're like, they could be a 2 seed if they win the Big Ten tournament. So it's crazy how much things have changed this season for those, blue blood programs. But yeah, I think what you said, anywhere in the 20 to 25 range is perfectly fair for Kentucky right now, which look back 2 weeks ago, and that would have been shocking information.
Well, I think they've gotten like 3 quad 1 wins and a really big quad 2 win over Auburn. I mean, just totally took care of Auburn, and that's the kind of results that'll move your resume depending on where you had them. We decided tonight, we had a virtual meeting with our group tonight. They're our first 6 seed right now, and we were considering them on the 5 seed line, but we thought we'd watch this Iowa State game. Iowa State has fallen a little bit. What happens tonight with Iowa State to make up that decision that has Iowa? We thought, did Iowa State fall that much and Kentucky rise that much to pass? Is that fair? And we're very aware of recency bias. We fight it all the time to look at that body of work and know that the wins that Iowa State got, despite their recent play, count just as much. So we kept Kentucky at the 6, but Alan, yeah, we think that they definitely, with a couple wins, can push even higher. Kerry, what's a seed line or a team that is questioned on your mind?
I would say it is Providence is the way, which was certainly the case last year as well. But they don't have any great wins away from home. I think they just have 3 home wins over the projected field, at least my projected field. So I don't know where to put them. I think I have them as an 8 right now. I could go anywhere from a low 6 to a high 10 on the Friars.
Yeah, Alan, you're the Big East guy. What do you think about Providence?
At the moment, I have Providence sitting as an 8 seed. And the difficult thing for me with them is how much value we saw placed on those away wins. And everything of meaning that they've done has been done at home. Their win over Marquette, their win over UConn, was it either Xavier or Creighton? I think it had to be Creighton because they have Xavier this week. Everything they've done has been at home, and obviously they aren't going to be playing NCAA tournament games at the Dunk. So that's going to be an issue for them. But that whole area from the 7 to the 10 lines, it's really hard to separate exactly where all those teams are. And for Providence, you at least have some of those Q1 wins up there. They have, some wins on the road, even if they aren't necessarily the wins that you would like to see on the road. They're not, the greatest of wins, but they have gone places and beat some people. 8-9 feels about right. If you look at the average of their resume and their predictives, it would put them right in the middle of the 9 line. I bumped them up a little bit just because they do have those 2 Q1A wins, and there really aren't a lot of other teams in that area that have those wins anywhere. So I would rather see a team that can beat them in some building as opposed to a team that can't beat them in any building.
We've had Providence on the 8 and 9 seed line, jockeying back and forth, depending on what other teams have. We've decided that in the past we've really appreciated wins, and I think back when we got started in bracketology, wins were the driving factor for a lot of the committees. And then all of a sudden the net shows in, and you add in the metrics, and that throws a different wrinkle. I think we at Delphi have been a little slow to incorporate some of those. So we're trying to come up with some new ways, but we just think that Providence, despite those wins, is going to sit on that 8 or 9 seed line for us. I have a couple questions. Kerry, I want to go to you with the mock selection and having to talk to several different people, which is real close to what the committee does. Mm-hmm. How different are the people in what they value, and did you see that difference kind of – I don't know if I'm asking a real great question, but I'm just imagining if you're talking to 8 or 10 people that they all see Providence or someone else a little bit differently. How does that work out, and how do you feel about that process? And is that something we heard a lot of confusion about consistency in how you approach it, but I think when you have so many people, that leads to inconsistency. Your thoughts on going through that and getting ready for this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, we follow the NCAA selection committee's guidelines to a T. It's you pick 4, rank 4, you pick 8, seed 8. It's Groundhog's Day. You're just doing the same thing over and over again. But you debate certain teams. I mean, there's not like I think a lot of people think that the selection committee is like, well, we'll let you have this one, and you give us this one over here, or whatever. There's nothing. It's just you're voting. You vote at 1 through 8, 1 through 4, whatever, and yeah, I mean, you definitely get different perspectives, though, because everybody approaches bracketology differently. Everybody has their spreadsheets a little bit different. They focus on different things, and it was eye-opening to see, certainly from Dave Oman, who used to do he still does Brackettville. He used to do it for NBC Sports, and he was, getting to chat with him a lot was great. He's been great on the Matrix for many years, and just being able to pick his brain on and argue with him on things was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the voting process is something that we've thought about too, is when teams get voted in, and then at certain times you start seeding those teams before you have all of the teams selected. And so I think that's important to try to gauge when a majority of the committee is going to vote a certain team into the field. But you're listening to the Bracket U. We're talking about tough bracket decisions. I see that we have a few people in the live chat. You can catch us also afterwards on YouTube, on our webpage, and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you have a question, throw that into the comment section, and we'll see if we can't answer that for you here live on the show. So I'm going to go back to another SEC team, and we really could just throw the Big Ten and figure that out, and the SEC as well. But Arkansas has been a team that we've been extremely low on all year, and then we kind of reevaluated as that net just climbed and their metrics just climbed out of this roof. they're two different teams. One, the metrics are really good, but the resume has some holes into it as far as who they've beaten. Alan, your thoughts on Arkansas?
They were another team that, like Kentucky, when I scrubbed yesterday, the numbers just jump off the page. Their strength of record is lacking a little bit. That's at 35, but everything else they have is top 15. That includes their net, which I don't look at a lot when it comes to selection or seeding, but it's a number that everybody likes to focus on. The wins that they have, the road Kentucky win looks a lot better now. The San Diego State win looks better now that San Diego State seems to be pushing for that 5 seed range. And it's not as many of the quality wins as you would like, but I've got them on the 6th line right now, and I feel pretty comfortable with that. It's just in terms of quality, and if there's going to be anything in terms of how they play with their entire roster available, they've been really good lately since Nick Smith came back. And you see what he's been able to contribute now that he's fitting into that team a little bit more. And I think any of the negativity that we may have had, it's what Eric Musselman does every year. He lulls us into a false sense of negativity in January and early February. And then by the end of February, they're running, and some unfortunate 3 seed is probably going to see them in the second round and have their hands full.
Kerry, where do you have Arkansas?
Yeah, I think I have them bottom 8, top 9 seed line. And if you're going just on metrics, yeah, hard to argue with them as a 6. But I think the one thing I keep coming back to is they're 7 and 9 against the top 2 quads. They do have the that one quad 3. I can't even remember who it's to. I'm not looking at their resume off the top of my head, but I know they're sub 500 against the upper echelon. Don't have those marquee wins outside of obviously that one great win over Kentucky. It's just been the exact point you're getting to, where it doesn't seem like the results match with the metrics. Like the computers love them, and what Alan was saying with Nick Smith, the injury factor is another thing that the committee is going to need to discuss with Arkansas for sure. But man, I loved Arkansas in November. May have sprinkled a little bit of money on them to win it all at that point in time. I regret that now. But yeah, I think early January I had them last 4 in, first 4 out, somewhere in that range, along with Indiana, and they've both just surged right up the seed list.
Yeah, we put them on as the last 6, and we debated that tonight, thinking that was too high. Again, because of the wins, but that's a decision that we're keeping open and have to look at, and that falls into Alan your 7 through 10 slot. Depending on what you value, you're going to move a team can move up to a 6 or a 7, or it can move all the way down to a 8-9 seed range, depending on what that individual committee member is thinking about. All right, Kerry, throw us a team.
Who else have I been struggling with? How about Utah State? Let's throw them out there. I mean,
we go to the bubble.
My God. Oh my God!
I'll take that one.
Utah State.
I'll take that one. I really want to place them in, and then I battle, and our group battles a little bit with, do we just want to put them in, or is the committee actually going to put them in, right? And, you go, how much do you go to trends and numbers and all of that kind of stuff versus this year is brand new, and you got to compare them to the teams. I do think that there should be 4 teams from the Mountain West. I think they're very competitive. They've shown that this year. And you have, for us right now, Utah State and New Mexico out. But Utah State is either our first team out or our second team out, waiting for Oklahoma State to go to 16 and 14 and West Virginia to go to 16 or 14. And we believe they're good enough to go in, because at some point you can't lose games in massive quantities despite your quad records. I think Wisconsin falls into that too, fellas. I don't like the way they look. Their metrics aren't great, but they have 6 quad 1 wins and 5 quad 2 wins, and it's hard to ignore that. And one of the questions we ought to talk about too is mid-major bid thieves. I'm all for that as a basketball fan, but our task is somewhat different. I think Utah State needs to do some work, but I think they're right there, and for us to throw them in. Alan?
Utah State at the moment is my last team in, and it came down to a Hunter Dickinson 3 that ended up changing that last night. I had Wisconsin in, and when they lost in overtime, it came down to those two teams. Wisconsin's now my first team out. And had I flipped a coin, I could have gone either way on them. They're so close despite having such different resumes. Now that Utah State has a quadrant 1 win, for so long they were sitting there 0-3 in quad 1 with bad losses, and it was like, I'm not even looking at this team. They've added a little bit sort of to the top of the resume, as much as Mountain West wins can be at the top of the resume, but they do have a winning record in quads 1 and 2. Not a lot of teams on the bubble can boast that. They're 18-6 against quads 1 through 3. That is fantastic compared to the teams that I'm comparing them against. They have a 5-4 road record, so this is a team that has shown they can win away from home. I would like to see them in. I don't know if they will end up there. I don't know if I'll have them there. For the moment, I'm good enough with them, I guess I'd say.
Do you have them in, Kerry, or out?
No, I have them out. And I mean, exactly what you guys are saying right now is why I had North Texas as my last team in a week ago. Then they lost to Charlotte. Now I have them out
Right.
again. But it's like, you just want something other than a 13-loss Big 12 team or a 12-loss Big 10 team to sneak in. But then, yeah, you like compare the resumes. Like you're saying, Wisconsin has 6 quad 1 wins. I mean, even Texas Tech is sneaking back in now when they were 12-12 with 1 decent win like 3 weeks ago. It's just these teams that get the opportunities, obviously their resumes look better over time. But yeah, the thing with Utah State is just they have that home win over Nevada and then the home win over Oral Roberts, technically a team that's in my field. I think they are a sneaky at-large candidate if they were to lose to South Dakota State in the Summit League Championship, but no great wins away from home and only 2 wins over the projected field, which is similar to where NC State is at right now if we want to double dip on a team that I'm confused on.
Let's go. NC State. Alan, I'll throw it to you. I'm going to look at their numbers.
Top of the 11 line for me right now. And it just, it amazes me how comfortable I felt with them a couple weeks ago. I very much had them in that 6 to 8 range where they were usually landing around a 7, but I really thought they could push a little bit higher than that. And I step back now and they've got 2 wins against my projected at-large field. It's just nothing in quad 1A. They have had some opportunities, but not as many as you would like. And the non-con strength of schedule certainly isn't where you would want it to be. The record looks good, but man, it is thin when you really dig into that resume again. And I think that's what we saw with the blowout this weekend. You get something like that, it changes what your metrics look like, and suddenly you cringe a little bit looking at what the resume is.
We have them as our last 9 seed and falling, but one of the things we look at is if you want to drop them, who's going to replace on that last 9 seed line, right? So does a Pittsburgh go in because they're at the top of the ACC, even though conference standing is not an official criteria? Does it imply something to the voters, that they won the conference regular season? If that does play out, do they sneak in? We have Memphis on the 10 seed line. We have a Rutgers team who is really sliding. They have wins. Their resume, Rutgers should be up higher, but they have an injury, and they really haven't played well since the injury, which the committee is going to take into effect. If they lose 2 games in the first game of the Big Ten tournament, they could be in jeopardy of getting in. I I think they're safe with the win against Penn State. But those are the teams that have to replace North Carolina State or beat out North Carolina State. And I think there's some there that when we finally get to it, we'll probably move a North Carolina State down. But yeah, we're nailing all the teams that give us a little bit of fits in our meetings. Alan, your shot.
Next team that I would ask about, and if for no other reason than what a exciting moment they created this weekend, Arizona State. I had them just on the other side of my next 4 out, and now suddenly you add a top 10 road win against Arizona. It might be 11 now. I'd have to double check their net. But either way, a great win that not many teams on the bubble have. Their 20-9 record looks a heck of a lot better. They do have that quad 4 loss. But I will say to their credit, that was a quad 4 road loss, true road loss against a SWAC team. You don't see any high majors really doing what the Pac-12 did with that this year. And I almost give them a little bit of respect for taking that game because nobody else is going into SWAC gyms. You don't see many people walking into Grambling or Prairie View A&M or Texas Southern like Arizona State did. And they're at the point where their resume looks a heck of a lot better than I thought it did, especially when you compare it to some of the other teams down there. The predictive metrics are terrible, but the resume numbers are good enough, and they do have some quality at the top with that Arizona win there now. Where are you guys at on the Sun Devils?
Kerry, what do you think?
Yeah, I've got Arizona State looking third to last in right now. I pushed them in with that win over Arizona. Like you said, you don't see teams going on the road and facing the SWAC, the MEAC, and you see why. We're going to keep mentioning that loss to Texas Southern until we're blue in the face over the next 2 weeks. But yeah, the big question I've had with them is, with Creighton, every time we look at Creighton, it's like, well, they didn't have Ryan Kalkbrenner for those losses.
I think Kerry popped out. We'll hope that he comes back in. He talked to us about his internet. We'll hope to add him back in. But Arizona State, for us, I put them back in. They're above 500 in quads 1 and 2. And I thought above 500 in quads 1 and 2, and then they're 4-0 in quad 3. I was like you, Alan. I was shocked when I finally looked at that after that win, that I thought, they needed to go in over Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's down 7 right now, so maybe that stays for us. Kerry, we got you back, Arizona State.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
But no, I was just saying with the Creighton win, if we're going to try and discount that loss for Creighton without Kalkbrenner, do we also have to discount it as a win for Arizona State? And that's been the big thing. But now that they have that win over Arizona, it's another story.
Yeah, it's going to come down to that last bid. Always seems to be a little shocking. A couple years ago, it was Belmont. I think that kind of shocked us. Maybe we wanted them in. We didn't think they were in. Last year was Notre Dame for a lot of us getting in. What was a complete shock. And so there's a lot of stuff that you got to kind of dig deep on your consideration list to see, what's going to happen that's going to sway that committee room to put that team that's going to be that last spot in. And that's where you get a little bit of the inconsistency is it was Notre Dame finishing well in a conference and not having a lot of opportunities and thinking, I think that's what it had to be the criteria going in. All right, let's go back to the list of tough bracket decisions here. Let's just go general with the bubble. Do you guys? I know there is no hard criteria in games above 500 or losses. We've talked tonight about 12 team losses and 13 team losses. We have a couple teams in the Big 12 right now that are trailing. I think West Virginia is trailing. Kerry, your thoughts on, as a committee member, is there a spot where you just can't put a team in despite some high quad 1 wins or some quality wins? Is there a loss requirement for you that teams have to pass or should pass?
It's so hard. The resumes on the bubble are just so different. You know, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, they've had every opportunity in the world. They've capitalized on some of them. North Carolina's had a lot of opportunities. They've capitalized on one of them. Some of these teams have had no opportunities. So it's like, the one that burned me a few years ago was Indiana. I think it was 2019. They had 15 losses, had a really strong resume overall, didn't have any terrible losses, but I think they were like 8-15 against the top two quads, had some quad one wins. Like we've been saying, at a certain point, it just seems to be too many losses, no matter how tough your schedule was. And I think if Oklahoma State and West Virginia were both to lose tonight, I have them out because they would be 16-14. Again, there's no hard line that you need to be a certain number of games over 500, but we've seen it. Even the teams who did get in with 15 losses, they at least had 19 wins. So it feels like you got to finish 4 games over 500.
Alan, your thoughts on accumulating too many losses to get in despite good resumes?
That 4 games over 500 is always something that I've looked at. I feel like we'll get some 18-14s or some 19-15s. Last year you did have Michigan getting in at 17-14, so it's not entirely unprecedented, but that felt like an incredibly unique situation. I think the last time that we had a team that wasn't +4 was Georgia. I'm not even sure what year it was. I think they got it at 16-14. That was at least 15 years ago, I want to say, though. So the committee has changed its membership, changed its numbers. It's significantly different now from what you saw back then. That's what I feel like we're looking at right now. And really the reason that I have been down on the idea of what started as 10-bid Big 12 and then became 9-bid Big 12 and then 8-bid Big 12. And, now we're quite possibly looking at 6-bid Big 12. And if I were to put money on it, I think that 6 is more likely than 8 at this point. I just don't see that much of a path for all of these teams getting there. And I know hypothetically, sure, you could have both West Virginia and Oklahoma State win out, but it doesn't feel likely, and Texas Tech is probably going to play spoiler. And I think their non-conference is just too weak to get them in with the loss they took the other night.
Yeah, I like that 3 or 4 games above 500 as just a baseline for consideration. I know it's not a rule or a criteria, but I think that Indiana team, they were 17-14, and they played Ohio State, who was 17-14 in the 8-9 game in the Big Ten tournament that year, and Ohio State won and 18-14 and went in, and then Indiana lost and dropped to 2 games over 500 and had enough wins that they fell out. So, yeah, I just think at some point, even if you play in good conferences, you have to avoid some massive number of losses. So I think you got Wisconsin and West Virginia and Oklahoma State that could easily fall out, and then you got your Utah States and your Michigans fighting to get back in. North Carolina stayed alive with a road win tonight that they couldn't afford to lose. They got to beat Duke, in my opinion, to even be considered, but just too many losses. So you're listening to the Bracket U from Delphi Bracketology. Again, if you have any questions, fire them off in the chat. But let's talk bid thieves. There's a few candidates that, resume-wise, I don't think will get in, but I think we've talked already about maybe seeing some of these teams in. Alan, give me your thought on a team that you think might be able to get in if they do not win their conference tournament. Let's say they all lose in their conference tournament to a good opponent. Who do you think has the best chance of getting in as a bid thief from a smaller conference?
Of the bottom 22 conferences this year, so that's not including Florida Atlantic, but everybody under them, I am very pessimistic on any bid thieves in that range. If there was one, maybe Charleston, just on the volume of wins that they have. But when you stack up what they have actually done against teams that are more in that at-large area. It just, their only wins against quad 1 and 2 were in their home MTE event. 2 losses outside the, 2 quad 3 losses. Their metrics are not good. I'm skeptical they'd be able to get in. Where I think you're more likely to see it would be Conference USA. If Florida Atlantic were to lose to a North Texas, something like that. And North Texas, the way that they play, the style that they play is very much something that can be difficult in a one-off situation. Probably Conference USA is the conference I am most looking at as a likely bid thief.
Let me throw you something on Charleston that just is keeping us watching them. They beat Virginia Tech, right? They lost to North Carolina, and then they scheduled a bunch of A-10 teams, which is up from their conference. Now, the A-10 is having a bad year, so that doesn't really help them, and I know it's just 1 year at a time, but Charleston kind of did what they scheduled up. They went 1-1 in the ACC. They went 3-0, I think, against the A-10. Now, that's not fitting into the quads, and everything you said is absolutely right, and I have a hard time thinking they're going to get it. But we're keeping them on the consideration list because if it comes down to, and we got a question here from a viewer that I'll get to in a second, if it comes down to that we don't like anybody being in and you got to have 68 teams, does that committee say they tried to schedule up, they went 4-1 against teams that are above them, and I'd have to look to make sure I'm speaking totally correctly on that, but I believe they played 3 A-10 teams. I think Charleston could sneak in if, like, these 12 teams, 13 teams lose 2 or 3 games and you're really struggling to find that 68th team. Kerry, who do you see as a potential small conference bid thief in that kind of situation?
Yeah, I think Charleston's got a shot. You guys have pretty well covered that. I mentioned Oral Roberts earlier. I think that's one team. They don't have any losses outside of quad 1. Granted, they only have 1 win over the top 2 quads. I think it was a home game against Liberty. But just not having any bad losses, I think will make them intriguing. I think they're top 50 in the net, somewhere around there in the predictive metrics as well. So I think they have an outside shot. And then even though we've been very down on the A-10, I can't bring myself to say with complete certainty that there's no way VCU or Dayton might sneak in, but I don't think they will.
Yeah, it's a shock, isn't it? The A-10 has had some quality basketball, and we still think it's probably good basketball. They're just running into some non-conference struggles, and then everything is driving down those quad numbers. So short of, I do. Let's go to FAU. I think they're in, even if they don't win. I think their metrics and they have enough in quad 1 and 2 to be in. But the question that I'm seeing is, where are you going to seed them? If you are focused on wins and the quads, they got to be a 9 or a 10. But you look at Murray State last year from a weaker conference in the Conference USA, and the committee had them at a 7. And I know there's probably some turnover, but you wonder where FAU. Kerry, your thoughts on FAU, and is it different if they win the conference versus not win the conference tournament?
Yeah, it's definitely different there, and I think they're solidly in as long as they don't lose 2 more games. They got to get to the Conference USA tournament without suffering another loss, and then I think they'll be in. Otherwise, they're a bit iffy. Right now, I have them at 30 overall, so that's middle of the 8 line. Yep. Yeah, I at one point before their second loss, I had them up as my top 6 seed, and I thought that probably was their glass ceiling, if you will. I didn't see them climbing any higher than that no matter what they did, and they've backslid a little bit. But yeah, I think they're right now solidly in as long as they don't take 2 more losses down the stretch. We've have them on the last 7 line almost as a placeholder right now to, if they get there, what teams move up and down. But we believe they're a 7 or an 8, depending on those scenarios. If they win the regular season and win out and win the conference, I think they're looking at a 7, even though resume-wise
it doesn't look like that. Alan, your thoughts on FAU?
I have them at the top of my 9 line right now. I would agree with Kerry. They can't afford to lose another regular season game. And they do have a little bit of a tricky finish. They have a pair of road games. They're playing at Rice and at Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech took them to overtime at home. So that one in particular is worth watching. They drop that game. They drop another one in the conference tournament. They become a little bit harder to place inside the field just because you don't have the volume. But winning record in quads 1 and 2 is nice. No losses outside quads 1 and 2, also nice. 7 to 9 right now is where I think they probably land. And yeah, the top of the 9 line, 33 overall for me. I could easily bump them up a couple. Kind of where they ended up coming out between the power teams that do have more impressive wins just because of opportunity.
So here's the beauty of bracketology. We have 3 people on here who love to do bracketology, and FAU is 28 through 33. I mean, really, that's what, 6 spots, and dependent on teams around them. And it's interesting in trying to communicate to fans and everything, as which our goal is to share with people. But a lot of people don't understand that that's not a whole lot of difference yet. That's 2 seed lines between where I'm at and Alan's at, and that's how close these things can turn out. Mike Ham in our chat says, normally the argument is over who was left out. This year the argument is doing enough to be considered in. He asks, have you ever seen a year where you can't figure out who to put in the last two seed lines? Kerry, we'll start with you. Is this a different year, or is this just like a lot of years when it comes down to the bubble?
Yeah, I think a week ago, before Arizona State's win, before Michigan's win, before, all these bubble teams now look a little bit better than they did 5 to 7 days ago. It was really hard. Like I had North Texas in because why the heck not at that point? And now I have, West Virginia and Oklahoma State just barely out. That's assuming they're going to lose tonight because my bracket doesn't publish until tomorrow morning. We'll update if need be. But, I have those good teams just barely out. North Carolina, you watch them play, they still usually feel like a tournament team. They're just barely out. Whereas before it was like, well, who else are we going to put in? North Carolina, you're a 10, even though you haven't won a quad 1 game. So I think the bubble has improved in the past week, but it's still ugly. Like if you're trying to look for teams like in that 6 to 9, first 5 out, and then a little bit beyond that, like who could go on a run and make it in, doesn't feel like there's anybody this year. Usually it feels like there's like 12 candidates heading into conference tournament season, and it's a lot smaller list than usual.
Alan, is it tougher to find teams to put in this year or drop teams out?
I think the most difficult thing that I'm running into is the teams that I want to put in don't have the resumes to justify it. I mentioned the last time I was on here, I would love to put Penn State in. I want to see Jalen Pickett in the NCAA tournament. I want him to have a chance to play on that stage. They have a style and shooting that isn't typically seen in the Big Ten, and I think they're a team that could make a run to a second weekend. But they don't have the resume for me to put them in. You look at New Mexico. They have a pair of great quad 1A wins that absolutely warrant inclusion, and they keep stepping on rakes every time they turn around. They're like that sideshow bob beam, just bang, bang, bang. They're Villanova is another team that, as we start to see them play a little bit more with a full roster, I would love to see them get a chance. The problem is all the teams that I want to put in are just too far out to really consider. And this, in large part, is why I'm in the minority of saying the NCAA tournament should expand. I want the tournament field to expand to 80. I think that if we put 8 games a night on Tuesday and Wednesday, instead of 2 games per night that end up being throwaways, it would feel like the tournament was starting earlier. You would be giving more chances to the mid-majors that everybody says they want to see but then, they complain when they get left out. Well, expand it to 80, give us 4 sites on Tuesday and Wednesday, and we'll be able to get those teams in there. And if you would have your bottom 16 at-larges playing off, as well as all of your 15 and 16s playing off in there, you're going to end up with a higher quality of auto bid that gets to the 64 team field. So it's going to be even riskier and even more likelihood of the chaos that everybody says they want to see on the first weekend, where your Virginia losing to a 16 seed is going to be that much more likely because you're weeding out half of your 15 and 16s right off the bat.
You opened up a can of worms here, Alan. I typically would disagree with you. I like it at 68. I think, for me, I don't want to water it down, but you made a very compelling argument that I'm going to have to sit back and think here a little bit afterwards, because, I think you made a good argument. I don't know that I agree with it quite yet, but we'll see. I would, before we try to wrap this up, I would like to see some slots for non-power teams, and I know that I don't think there's a real fair way to do that, but you can, if you have 32 automatic bids, could you go to 32 at large, and then 4, committee can select for whatever reason, and then that protects your Charlestons and your Oral Roberts from a buzzer beater on the third night. Taking away a whole body of work against their tournament. And I know that your argument to 80 also solves that, so we'll probably have some stuff in common. But, fellas, let's end the show this way. Everyone, as soon as Selection Sunday's done, everyone's going to argue about who was overseeded and who was underseeded. I should have maybe thrown that question to you to give you a chance to think about that a little bit. But there's always going to be the Dickie V. Oh my gosh, they got left out, or this team is a 8 seed and they're going to go through the tournament like North Carolina, Kentucky, or whatever, based on name only instead of resume. Kerry, who's going to be overseeded too high? Meaning, 3 or 4 seed that should be a little bit lower, or they're going to be underseeded where they're going to give a good team a battle.
Yeah, I don't know that Kentucky will be overseeded, but after all the time we spent talking about them on the bubble, if Selection Sunday comes and there are 4 or 5, people are going to lose their minds who haven't been paying attention to it every day. And I think an underseeded team will probably be Memphis. Right now I have them as right on that 10-11 cut line. They almost beat Alabama. They almost won at Houston without Kendrick Davis. If they don't beat Houston, they're going to be smack dab on the bubble, and everybody's going to be saying, oh my God, look out for Memphis. They're going to be this year's, VCU going first 4 to Final 4. So I would say I'm sticking to the heartland there, Kentucky and Memphis.
All righty, Alan, who's overseeded and underseeded at the end of Selection Sunday?
The first team that comes to mind that I think is going to be overseeded is the same one that I thought was overseeded in the reveal, and it's Iowa State. I understand that they had a good road win, but the volume of losses they had compared to the teams that were behind them, I just did not understand them being on the 3 line. UConn's another one that I'm not sure where they're going to fall, but metrically speaking, that was a 3 seed when the reveal came out, and not even having them in there didn't make sense to me. The team that I can totally see Dickie V going off about is the Missouri Tigers. And it's going to be the whole argument of they beat Illinois, they beat Kentucky, they beat Arkansas, they beat Iowa State, they beat all these teams that are higher seeded than them. And yet they have resume metrics in the 60s and just are not there on paper at a point where it's quite where you would like to see them. They're definitely one of those teams that it's going to be interesting to see where they land, and they could just as easily lose by 20 to a 9 seed in the first round as they could go to a Sweet 16 or even an Elite 8 by buzzer beating a 1 seed and a 4 seed.
I think Duke's going to get a little heat on wherever they go, whether it's too high or too low, right? And it's going to be Dickie V. How can Duke be an 8 seed? Come come on, they haven't lost a game in quads 3, and you're going to see that just based on name recognition. And then some of those teams on that 8 or 9 seed line, I think, are going to give some 1 seeds a scare. I don't think they're better, but when we're having difficulty in saying teams on the 8 or 9 seed line, so you're looking at Providence, being a team that can really compete at a high level, and if they are in an 8-9 game and win that first round, I think that those teams like that are dangerous. Your Illinois, very athletic, that have been hot and cold. You're going to get a lot of those that have some good wins that people are going to say, how can you have them that low? I think that happens all the time. So conference tournaments are starting up. Is there one in particular this week that you're going to keep your eye on, just from a basketball fan's perspective, or for upsets that might mess up a bracket? Alan, any conference tournaments that you're staring at this week?
I think this week I'm not quite as geared into yet. I will have to get into my Jerome and figure out exactly where I'm going with the first week of games. And maybe this is just the Marquette fan in me. I'm really looking hard at the Big East. And I think that I've heard a number of people talking about Villanova potentially playing spoiler. Where they are going to end up sitting with the way that bracket likely pans out is they're probably going to have Creighton and Xavier on their side of the bracket. Those are 2 teams that they just beat in the past week. They are playing much better than they were, and they are definitely on the weaker side of the bracket. The 3 teams that I think are most likely to give them trouble are Marquette, UConn, and Providence. And I find it hard to believe we're not all going to be jammed up against each other with 2 of the, one of those teams is going to be out on Thursday and the other one's going to be out on Friday. And Villanova will only have to beat one of them if they're able to get to that Big East final. That's a team I'm really watching, and I'll admit there's a little bit of self-interest there too, because I can't quit my Marquette.
Kerry, is there any tournament that's getting going that you really are interested in watching?
I will second the Villanova notion. I just finished writing pick for every 32 tournaments, and that is my bid thief pick. I think Villanova is the 6th seed. Exactly what you're saying. They don't have to face Connecticut or Providence or Marquette until the championship game. That's a nice little path for them. But this week, just looking at the schedule, probably the Summit League, just to see if Oral Roberts can finish the fight, get to whatever that would be, 21-0 in league play. South Dakota State was able to do it last year. Can Max Asmus do it now that he's got his 7'5" Connor Van over there with him? I think that's a team. If they end up as a 12 seed, I think 98% of people are going to pick that upset.
Yeah. I have a friend of my son's who managed at Indiana together who is on their staff, so I have a personal interest in rooting for Oral Roberts. For me, it's the Sun Belt. I think it's very competitive with several teams over 20. I think they have 4 teams in the top 100 of the net and 4 teams over 20 wins. Marshall and Southern Miss are probably the top 2 seeds in that tournament. It's just fun to watch. These teams have a shot at getting to the big dance, and it means a lot. And it's their only path. So, fellas, I thank you for taking this time to talk brackets. I wish you nothing but luck in selecting your brackets. And Kerry, enjoy the mock selection. And let's just go around again and share with everyone where they can find your work, and then we'll call it an evening. Kerry.
Yeah, hopefully my internet is better for the mock committee in a couple days. Got to get that tech out here. But yeah, I'm at Bleacher Report. I assume I'll be featured a lot, but who knows? On Twitter, Karen's James, and you want to yell at me about Providence and Rutgers' seeds, I'm always happy to shake it up with fans.
Alan.
On Twitter, I am at BruceCity1977, and you can find my brackets at crackedsidewalks.com. Like Kerry, more than happy to discuss that stuff and why there's a very good chance that Bryce Hopkins could be the best player on the floor in the second round game that he ends up in.
Well, fellas, I just appreciate following your work and getting to talk to you and joining us on a Monday night and talking brackets. It's a fun gig. I hope you enjoy the next couple of weeks. And so that'll do it for this episode of the Bracket to You. We'll be back on Thursday with some of our students. Look for our TV show on ISC Sports Network, studio show. We film that tomorrow. We'll talk a little more. You can always find our work on DelphiBracketology.com. We have an updated seed list and bracket out tomorrow. And always follow us on Twitter at Delphi Brackets. So for Kerry Miller and Alan Bykiowski, I'm Brian Tonsoni, and happy hoops watching.